the Agile brand.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Innovation Economy podcast, where we look at what it's like to build businesses, work, and live in an innovative place, and the role of location in a hyper-connected, hybrid work world. The Innovation Economy podcast series is brought to you by Arlington Economic Development, representing Arlington, Virginia, one of the most dynamic economic hubs in America, with resources for businesses from the Fortune 500 to startups and everything in between. You can learn more about them at www.arlingtoneconomicdevelopment.com. That's www.arlingtoneconomicdevelopment.com. To listen to the latest episodes or sign up for the Innovation Economy newsletter, go to innovationeconomy.show or click follow on your favorite podcast app. And now on to the show.
A quick online search of Cade Martin Photography will get you to a showcase of exceptional commercial work, some video reels, sought-after portraits, and much more. But if you're trying to find out his secrets to his business success, or even what he looks like, you'll have to keep looking. I'm Susan Soroko, Director of Creative Economy at Arlington Economic Development in Arlington, Virginia. The role of economic development is to retain and attract businesses where workers can live and thrive in a great community, even when the work world is changing. We support small businesses through programs like BizLaunch, and we value the importance of placemaking and a sector devoted to creative economy and the arts. Today, we're going to talk about art and business and the huge shifts in professional photography. To help me discuss this, I'd like to welcome Cade Martin, exceptional photographer. Cade, welcome to the show.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for having me.
It's really quite a pleasure. You've had years of adding your magic to an industry that now has everyone believing that they are pros if they just upgrade their phone. So let's start with your background. And what was the moment you knew this would be your life's work and art?
Well, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. Both my parents worked at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, and so my dad, he was in the painting and printmaking department. So he was there for 32 years. So I grew up in this community of artists, sculptors, printmakers, writers. So I think I got sort of a visual education just sort of by osmosis growing up. A lot of my dad's friends, my mom's friends asked me if I was going to do something creative when I grew up. And I was just like, no way. So when it was time for college, I went to Virginia Tech for engineering. I guess that was my rebellion. I've always got along great with my folks. I wasn't really rebelling against anything, but I was sort of just very unsure of who I was and which direction I was going and what I wanted to do with my life. And so I guess that's sort of a part of college. I was at Tech for a year and a half, great school, but, just wasn't for me. And so I came back to VCU in Richmond and just sort of took a hodgepodge of classes. I think I took an art history class, history of socialism, a basic economics course, and a basic photography course. And it's funny because right now I'm calling in from Nags Head, the Outer Banks, and this is a place that I've come since I was like probably a couple months old. And before I took this basic photography course, my dad was doing a series of paintings, big, large paintings on waves, just sort of abstractions. And I was heading down to the beach with a friend of mine, Matt Hyland, who I've known since third grade. And actually, he is with me in this house right now, not in this room, but we went camping with another buddy of ours from high school. So my dad goes, hey, I'm doing this series of paintings on waves. I'm going to give you my camera. Can you go down and take pictures of waves? And I was like, sure. So I'd never taken a photo in my life. And so I left Matt, John Brandt, walked the beach, and I got completely lost in the frame of this camera. And I was taking pictures of the sand. I was taking pictures of little crabs. I was taking pictures of waves, my assignment from my father. And I just sort of was able to sort of escape into this sort of little horizontal box. And I just absolutely just loved it. So Long story short, I go back to Richmond. I give my father the camera back. He goes and develops the film. Every single image was completely black, 1,000% underexposed. And he was like, "Well, what did you do?" And I go, "Well, I took some pictures." And he goes, "Well, did you like do the exposure, in the camera?" And I was like, "Well, what's that?" So there's my story of starting off.
It's an auspicious beginning, but obviously you didn't let that deter you. So, how did you get to figuring out that you were going to go back to that and do it again? And what was your first camera?
Yeah, I took this basic photography class, and I remember the only thing I was ever interested in was playing basketball. I was bouncing the basketball. I took this basic photography course. I went in, I had my basketball with me, and I sat down, and it was in the basement. I totally remember it like it was yesterday. And it was all everybody in there was just dressed in black, and they were all philosophizing about cameras, about art, and all this. And I was just thinking in my head, it's like there's no way that I can compete in this space. I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm going to drop this class as quick as I can. And I think I went and played some basketball, and I forgot about dropping the class. And then I kept kind of doing it. And so at that point in my life, I really wasn't really interested in much else, sadly. And so this sort of kind of put its hooks in me. My first camera, I think, I was using my father's camera. It was a Mamiya that he had gotten from his brother. And I think the first camera I have, which I still have, it's in Richmond. I have a studio in Richmond. That's a Pentax 1000 film camera, all manual, nothing automatic.
That is amazing. Do you still have it?
Oh yeah, no, I still have it. I haven't used it for years, but I still have it. It's one of those things that you can't sort of throw away or sell.
And harder to find the film. Our job in BizLaunch is that we try to give entrepreneurs tools and a solid footing for success. And creatives can be reluctant to focus on getting the business side right. But as a photographer, you're not just an artist, you're also running a business. And how do you balance the creative side with the entrepreneurial side as we kind of move forward in your career?
Well, I may be jumping ahead, but sort of when I got my start out of school, I really kind of realized I didn't know anything about sort of making a living aspect of it. When I was at VCU, great school, great teachers, but it was more about just go out and take cool pictures. It was nothing about the business side, how to market, or anything such as that. So when I got out, I really kind of figured out really quickly I was kind of flying blind, and so I was an assistant, sort of an apprentice, and so I worked for this one photographer full time for I don't know, almost 2 years, and then I started freelancing, working with different photographers, which was great because you sort of came across a lot of times the same problem, but saw different solutions. But also, you sort of saw how people interacted with clients. You saw how they marketed or didn't market. So I certainly learned what to do, but I think I also learned what not to do, which is just as important. And completely, I think somebody that's really a amazing photographer with no marketing business sense, they're not going to do as well as somebody a mediocre photographer who's great at marketing. So I may fall into that latter category because I think I've been good at marketing. And when I first started, it was sort of the days of the portfolio, and you would just go to a printed portfolio. And actually, I still have a printed portfolio, but it seemed a lot easier where you could say, "Hey, I want to come by, the shop, agency or graphic design or mom and pop shop, to show your work." So, of course, when I started out, I had a lot of time, so I just beat the pavement, and you had to call people, you couldn't email people, and I guess I'm dating myself here, but you showed up and you showed the portfolio, and then also sort of a part of this is how you get along with people, and I think people want to sort of work with people. You certainly have to be able to back it up talent wise, but they want to hang out with people that they like. I've done a lot of travel over sort of my career, and you're spending long hours with people, on the road or whatever. And so I think chemistry, all that sort of plays a big part as well. But there's certainly there's a balance of art and commerce. So I think personal projects, again, I may be jumping ahead, but personal projects have certainly been the wind at my sails. When I first started, I was, busy sort of right off the bat, which was great. And I'm much more inspired going to the cinema, you're looking at photo books, Vanity Fairs, that sort of stuff. And, I would see this great work and I was like, God, I would love to do that type of stuff. And, I was the first to admit that I just didn't have the abilities and capabilities at that time for anybody to say, oh, I want to hire Cade for this. So I started self-assigning myself projects, and I've done that. I do that to this day. And, over time, those images that I sort of wanted to make, I started weaving those in my portfolio. And then all of a sudden, I had the work that sort of maybe spoke to projects that, I did not have that ability before.
You just described a fairly typical, I would say, kind of a trajectory for a lot of photographers who came up through the film side of the business with relationships as a real backbone to how their businesses work. We're now hearing a lot about businesses, creative and otherwise, that have struggled. They've struggled to make the necessary changes to their business models by not keeping up with technology. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest impacts to your business. So, tell us a little bit about what you've done to keep your skill sets and your business model ahead of the curve.
Well, I don't know if I'm ahead of the curve, but I guess I'm old
Giving
enough.
you credit, you're ahead of the curve.
Thank you. Thank you. Smoke and mirrors. And maybe in my case, that's literal. I guess I'm old enough that I started with film, which I'm very grateful for, because with film, technically, there's not a lot of latitude, not a lot of leeway. So you really have to kind of know what you're doing technically. So, of course, digital has a lot more latitude, but I'm glad I sort of came up in the years of, film. And certainly, digital came about, and now we have the phones, and digital is great, and it's wonderful for clients and the client's client, because you can go on set and you have a monitor right there, and you're tethered to the camera, and you can see the images exactly as they appear. What we're doing, popping up on the laptop. We can lay the images into the layouts on set, so we can sort of navigate around typography or logos or anything like that. And it's like, oh, I need a little bit negative space over here. So you create that. With film, you sort of had these overlays and all that. So you could do it, but it was just a little more sort of, I don't want to say crude, but, it was just sort of a slower process. And so, digital is pretty amazing. And, it's a funny thing, I'm not quite a Luddite, but I'm not a super technical guy. And, I have a really nice camera. I have a Sony camera. It's sort of the flagship of the Sony cameras, but I probably know how to use maybe 1% of what the camera's capable of. I know how to do it manually, but, all this and that and this, it's just like, no, I don't know. Just for one, I've never had the interest either. It's funny because it's one of those things. It's like, oh, Kate, I love this photo, and then it's like, what kind of camera did you use to make it? And it's like, it's like a writer and a typewriter. It's like, oh man, I love that. What kind of typewriter did you use? So, I don't know. It's a funny conversation, and it's like, I don't know. Sure. These days, phones, that sort of thing, everyone can take a picture, but can everyone make a picture? So I think there's a little bit difference there. And, I love my phone. I was in Thailand, I don't know, in August, and went out to eat with this family, and a young guy, he was like in his early 30s, and he was like, oh man, I love your work. He goes, what's your camera? What's your favorite camera? And, I had my pants, a zipper, and I opened up the side zipper and I pulled out my phone, and it's like, this right here. And I love it, because it's like you can, not for commercial jobs, but actually I have shot commercial jobs on my phone, but very or few and far between. But the tech, the quality, everything is just really nice on those things. And you just put it in your pocket. You're not carrying around a big bag, all that sort of stuff to weigh you down. So, but no, you certainly have to sort of know what's going on, and you have to sort of stay relevant, and sort of keep up with how you can sort of make everything as easy for the client's client, as you can, and something that works for you as well, that you're comfortable with.
Well, you've probably heard that Arlington has a pretty robust tech sector, and you may have heard of a few that have made their headquarters here. So, where do you see the photography industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years, especially with the rise of AI and automated tools?
Yeah, I guess it's back to sort of making an image making, say if, I have, the Sony camera, my phone, whatever. And it's really like your interaction with folks and, how you can sort of make them comfortable and how you can sort of maybe capture that little moment. And, you're photographing folks that, maybe aren't used to having their photo taken. And, you have a short amount of time to sort of make that work. And, you walk in and you kind of have to take the temperature of the room and you have to sort of, just have that sort of the ability to sort of get something out of folks and, as well as making them comfortable. So AI, that is certainly coming. And I think we have to embrace it. If you don't embrace it, we're going to be left behind. You think of, CG. I've certainly used a lot of CG. I've worked with that, a lot. Film going to digital. There was a lot of photographers, older photographers at the time. It's like, oh no, I hate digital. And I remember when websites, and it was like, it's like, oh, am I going to do a website? And it's like, no, I have no idea who's going to look at my website. I'm not going to do a website. So and then you have to have a website, and so everything sort of changes, and I think you just have to be sort of comfortable with sort of the change. But I think mixed in of all this, you have to sort of have a belief in yourself and stay true to who you are, regardless of the vehicle that you're using to sort of make an image. AI, again, it's coming, and I think how you approach that, sort of the humanity of it, I think how people create images is, just like a photograph, it's going to be all over and all over the place. And, especially, think of life experiences, life lived. I saw an article, I don't know, a year or so ago about this German photographer, and he was really embracing AI, and he was probably 70. And, he was talking about he was heavily influenced by Panin and all these great artists. And so when he goes in and he uses the prompts, he has all these sort of life experiences, inspirations, and all this to sort of bring to that. And I think that's going to be a lot different from some of that's 21, 22 who might be like typing in Spider-Man or something such as that. So it's almost like the flavor of the air. It's sort of, again, I'm just down in Nag's Head, I'm looking out the water, and it's just sort of, you see like the mist and atmosphere and, weather patterns. And, I guess all that's sort of valid for, this sort of prompt in and all that. With CG, a lot of the things that people come to me for is sort of building these sort of fantastical sort of worlds, magical worlds. And then we photograph folks in studio, and then we composite them together, sort of seamlessly integrate the people into these fantastical environments. And this is just a small percentage of my work, but I think AI, maybe you'll be able to do that in the future. I'm sure you can. Right now there's a lot of uncertainty with sort of copyright, usage rights, all that with AI. I mean, right now the federal government does not see AI as something that you can copyright. You look at something like Mid-Journey and you look at all the verbiage, which boilerplate verbiage, which, is like the size of the phone book, and you just go through it and you still don't know. It's like, well, who owns this? It's like, I work with AI, I put in the prompts, an image pops out. That's kind of cool image. Who owns it? It's like all of a
Yeah.
sudden you send it off. But that said, say, I don't know if you guys saw it, but I guess a week or two ago, Coca-Cola just came out with a complete AI commercial for Christmas.
Everybody heard about that.
Yeah, yeah. But, AI, it's like, oh, Christmas, how could they do that? Blah, blah, blah. But, sort of behind the scenes, I think, they had like 20 people, 20 experts, working on that. So, they were sort of bringing that human element to, whatever they were creating. But it
Yeah,
was just funny. At the end of the commercial, it's their logo, Coca-Cola, keep it real. And it was like this AI experience. So it was kind of funny.
You've touched on so many things that are so relevant to your industry and technology and the influence of technology. What advice would you give to someone just starting out in photography, especially in terms of building a sustainable business and maintaining a creative edge? And I think you've touched on that with, your emphasis on relationships, but tell us a little bit more about, what you see as, what's really been the stalwart of the foundation of your work that would really be relevant to people's just starting out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's funny because it's like I can do whatever I can do, but I can't articulate what I do. So I would be like the worst professor or teacher, something such as that. Someone's like, "Oh, hey, how'd you do that?" And it's like, well, it's like I went over there and I did this, and okay, and I did that, and it kind of worked out. But personally, I've been hugely, and I can thank my parents for it, because again, they were, VCU, and I grew up in this art community, and so, I was exposed to all this stuff, and as well as movies. It was like every Friday night, we would go down to the Biograph down near VCU. We would go to Jerry's Pizza, which was right across the street, and then we'd go see these just great, crazy movies, and a lot of them, this was like 70s, late 70s, and all like completely inappropriate for the age that I was at the time. But you really see, and to this day, going to the movies is my therapy. And I'm an only child, and it's like I can go in and nobody talks to me for 2 hours, and I think I can learn something even from a bad movie. But you learn about light and you learn about composition and all that. But for whatever reason, I've never been interested in making a film for myself. But that said, I think storytelling is such a huge thing, and I like, if I had to describe myself in any way, it'd be sort of very clean, very minimalistic, very sort of simplistic, the images. But I feel like I want each of my images to feel like just one little frame in a film strip. So you see what's going
Mhm.
on, you look at the image, there's some kind of narrative going on. So you feel like there's a story that goes on beyond what this image is.
That's so perfect. You've touched on so many of the things that are so relevant to the way that we're looking to help support these small businesses. I want to ask you, what's next for a photographer like you that's reached such a high level? Are you going to do a coffee table book, a speaker series, radio show, maybe a documentary? What do you think is next for you?
I don't know, such pressure, such pressure. I don't know though. What's next? I guess the great thing about my business is you never know what's coming around the corner. And usually I know what I'm doing for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And beyond that, it's sort of just a blank slate. If somebody were to email me or call me about a project, it's like, oh, we're going to shoot a portrait of, so and so at, association in DC in 6 months. Probably there's a 99.9% chance, that's going to change, schedules change, somebody gets sick, whatever. But again, the great thing about my business is I just never know what's coming around the corner. Like a few weeks ago, I guess 2 weeks ago now, but back up 2 weeks before that, all of a sudden I get a call and it's like, hey, I have this project in Puerto Rico. Would you be interested? It's like, yeah, sure. And so I've always wanted to go to Puerto Rico. And so 2 weeks ago, I was in Puerto Rico and doing a portrait of a guy in the rainforest. So yeah, just life experiences.
You have a great ability to say yes to things, I can tell.
Yeah, or the ability to even kind of say no if you're not the right person, and because there's certain things that I'm not the best at. I think I certainly have a range. My work sort of has a range, so I do a lot of work for say associations. Last week I did corporate portrait project. I did a government portrait project. But say if somebody were to call up and say, hey, I have this project, we want beautiful food photography. I would certainly maybe give them recommendations. Even for architecture, it's like I love doing architecture, but I'm sort of the more abstract, kind of
Right.
Batman angles, that sort of stuff. But if they wanted sort of like a clear representation where all the lines are straight, I'm not really that guy, and so I would refer that to somebody that's really good at it. But I've enjoyed living a creative life, and I guess more importantly, I guess as we all get older, it's I don't know. I just enjoy working with nice people. I think the pandemic, I think that changed sort of a lot of people's mindset
Yeah.
leading up to the pandemic. I was so crazy busy, and my kids now they're in college, but everybody was home, and this was like the year leading up to the pandemic. And I think the last 3 or 4 months of that year, I think I was home in my own bed like 7 days. And I was jumping one plane, this plane, and I was so depressed. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is just unsustainable. This is unhealthy. And so I was like, I need something. Something needs to change. And of course, the pandemic happened. I was like, well, I don't know if I needed that type of change, but the main thing was it's just I enjoy, of course, everybody does, but I just want to work with nice people that, say thank you and you enjoy being with. And, I've certainly, created a body of work, and, it's sort of an internal struggle for me a little bit, because it's like, well, do I necessarily need to create another really cool image? So I guess mixed in there a little bit, maybe it's just a sign of getting older a little bit. It's also kind of contentment too. For so many years, I'm still driven, but I was like super, super driven. But I always had this sort of carrot, and then I would reach my goal, and then I would reset the carrot. And so it was this sort of weird thing that, this kind of, I don't know, this gerbil wheel or whatever. So I don't know. I need to smell the roses a little bit.
Well, we hope that as we wrap up that we will be supporting a little event on December 11th at Renegade in Clarendon. I'm putting in a plug so that we can help support more of those kinds of intersections for creatives and businesses, and we'll provide some details on that event in the show notes. But we really appreciate hearing your side of the story, because we want to be able to allow people to find out where they should be looking for inspiration and skill building. We're going to be giving them lots of business support links. But I want to thank you for sharing your insights into how you managed to be the amazing creative that you are. We hope to see you at our event coming up. Any last words of wisdom for our audience today?
No, just belief in self. And I think that's just super important. And I just want, thank you. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show. We're going to be providing show notes for Cade Martin Photography, the event at Renegade in Arlington, and support at BizLaunch. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Innovation Economy podcast, brought to you by Arlington Economic Development. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes at innovationeconomy.show or on your podcast platform of choice. The Innovation Economy is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, let's keep innovating.
The Agile brand.